Good evening. Welcome to Defacto Review, our weekly in-depth analysis on the current news and affairs with our commentator and economist, Mr. Jargal Defacto.
Good evening.
And I'm your host, Namsred Sindh. You can join in on our conversation on MNP World Facebook page, on Twitter with Jargal_Defacto. Now let's get into our topics for today. The promise of state budget without deficit. Will monetary policy change? Refined fuel and air pollution. Now let's talk about our first topic. On September 26th, Minister of Finance Jargal presented bills on state budget of Mongolia for 2020. He highlighted that budget investment has reached trillion tugruks for the first time, 2 trillion tugruks. Jargal also noted that even though there is 1 million deficit, the government will not issue any domestic or external bonds to compensate for this deficit. So our first question about this is that, is the next year's budget about the election process? Because there is about 2 million tugruks budgeted for the investment. Is it a right decision to invest this much?
Well, first of all, this is a draft of the budget, which will be approved by the end of November this year, like every year. Second, this 2 trillion investment is the so far largest investment government makes a year before. 2 trillion, out of which 600 billion tugriks will go to new projects, and 1 billion will go to the existing projects, second or next financing, and it goes to 300 billion tugriks will go to concessions, which is signed and start already. The new project is around 600 billion, as I said. Every year, a year of election, every government is trying to invest as much as possible. And most notably, the annual investment, but the mostly is done before the election. So next year, first 6 months is going to be a lot of investment years. And why? Because in Mongolia, all ministers are also parliament member who are elected. And they, of course, try to bring more state investment to their own constituency. So as a result, for example, if we have more ministers from countryside, provinces, Ulaanbaatar is staying a little less with that year investment. And plus, also there will be investment from the money of ODA, Overseas Development Assistance money, including discounted loan, long-term loan, and some assistance. And with those money, the government is planning to renovate or replace some current theater buildings, including theater and museum buildings, including opera, theater, drama, theater, etc. So there will be interesting investment year next year. And also the minister said that this cabinet has been investing a lot in social projects like kindergarten, schools, and dormitories for students, and 68, call it culture center, and 92 hospitals and other centers. Total 691 buildings will be made completely by the 2020.
So every year Mongolian state budget has deficit, but we were promised the state budget will have no deficit. However, the Minister of Finance introduced yet another draft of state budget with deficit. Why is that? What's wrong with it?
Well, first of all, say 4 years ago, in 2016, the deficit was 18% to GDP. 17, 9.5% to GDP. 18, 8% to GDP, and this year, 19, 5.4% to GDP. And this year, we'll have around 1 billion 1 trillion Tugriks deficit, and also again it's a deficit. And out of total income of budget, which is 10.7 trillion Tugriks, 11 will 10.7 trillion will consist of sorry, total revenue of the budget is about 13 trillion, but 11 almost trillion of them will consist of taxes, which is a large income for the budget. And they increase the expenses. Expenses of the budget will be 13.9 billion, almost 14 trillion Tugriks, and out of which 4.2 trillion will go for pension and social care. So which shows that still the government is a lot cost is consisting of income is consisting of the taxes, and many of them will go for social care, and 2.6 billion trillion will go for wages, and that's why the deficit will be 2 trillion, and out of which 1 trillion is going to 1 trillion is staying with the Future Heritage Fund, and 125 billion Tugrik will stay with Stability Fund, which is good is they have not touched that fund, and if you take it minus, if you take it out from the budget deficit, it will be the budget deficit will be at 1 billion. That's what the Minister of Finance says. Why this year is again a deficit? Because when they talk about the budget, they almost talk about how to spend, mostly where the money comes from, where they're going to, one. Secondly, the other way of decreasing deficit is to decrease the state expenses. Do we talk about that? Not see. We haven't seen that yet. That's why so far, as usual, the economy has grown for about 6%, but the state budget is always increasing.
So what should we pay attention from the draft of this next year's budget?
Like any year, for any budget, we should think again, where are our expenses of the government? Are they justified? Are they making our life more competitive, better, tomorrow better? Which they don't talk much, because, I mean, for example, first of all, the state-owned enterprises keep increasing the amount, and all of them are working almost with the losses, never with profits. It is mostly caused for example, all power stations own money to coal mining companies. All state-owned coal mining companies own money to railroads, etc. This cyclical debt, this circle of debt, destroying the economy and is stopping us moving forward. It's a matter of a free price for electricity, which at least to be close to that, and also it is a matter of a case of a railway, Ulaanbaatar Railways, which is joint venture between two governments. And this company never pays tax, so many other social costs, and that's why they always have more costs than their revenues. And the other thing is why we should keep increasing state-owned enterprises when we need more private companies to be active. Why we keep increasing taxes. You know, increasing taxes means they are taking money from the private companies, which otherwise can go for their extension. Of course, social care, the employees' tax, understandable. The companies are paying, but the return on that, the social insurance, all this stuff is still bad for employees. And again, last point, we should look at the function, why do we need the state? We state need only for protection of three things: private property, rights of people, and safety of people. The rest can be done a lot by private sector, by the will of the people.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's get into our next topic. Along with the presentation of the draft of next year's state budget, Governor of Mongolbank, Bayir Tsakhan, presented government's monetary policy of next year. The government aims to keep the inflation rate around 8%, and as of August 2019, inflation rate of Mongolia was 8.9%. So our question about this one is, will the monetary policy change?
Well, one of the tools to keep inflation is monetary policy, which starts from the policy rate of the central bank, which is keep staying at the level of 11% for some more than 2 years. Why they don't go lower so that inflation comes lower? It has a lot good explanation, because in reality the explanation is the inflation is around 8%, which is way better than before, but still within the 8% it's very hard to have a stable economy. Though the central bank is putting as a plan to have it at the level of 6%. They explained the current inflation rate, mostly the current 8.9% is 3% is because the meat price, and 1% is because the food and other prices. But still, it takes not only the policy rate to have the inflation lower, but most probably it has a matter of the US dollar to tugrik rate, which depends on our export, and we consume a lot import materials, mostly all except foods, almost all goods. So, but then we export mostly mining commodities. So, depending on the market of these prices of these two directions, the tugrik exchange rate change it, and mostly making influence on inflation.
So, does this next year's monetary policy align with works to decrease financial risks and loan interests?
They try, but there are still certain risks which keep staying in Mongolia. Outside, of course, everybody knows more details about US-China trade war, and also the slowing growth rate of Chinese economy, which is making impact on the other economies, including Mongolia. But we have also domestic risks. First of all, this is a risk of entering into the gray list, so-called gray list, which the related international organizations are reporting about a country. In Mongolia, there are a lot of things to report about the not complete transparency of the financial sector, etc. And a good example is just the increase of equity capital of Mongolian commercial banks under the conditions of IMF. And IMF, after they have reported increased their equity capital, IMF asked central bank again to check whether the money come from those. We had a special pardon law, forgiveness law, in 2015 for anybody who had not yet declared their financial and their real estate. If they can declare, they just pay tax, then they will not ask about the source of money. And it looks like several banks have been using this opportunity. Their owners put money where the source are not demanded and kept in secret by the state, which obviously doesn't make the commercial bank more healthier, because the source of money not clear. That's why it's another big risk for also again inflation, because if we have some problem with equity capital increase of the commercial banks, then it's a matter of availability of a loan, and it's also availability of the health sector of the commercial banks. It's a very important issue for Mongolia, because our interest rate, credit rate is still high.
So, from what we see from the report of the Asian Development Bank, Mongolia's economy is going to be fairly stable in the upcoming years. So, will this stability persist? Does Mongolia actually have a stable economy now?
When you have 8% of inflation, it says that it is not that stable. Stable economy is where the risk is under 3% around, or 2%. And we need to go a lot down to have this inflation down and the economy stable. And it also shows in Mongolian cases, we depend a lot on our mining commodities, coal, copper, namely. And also we depend a lot on the flow of foreign direct investment, which may be slow next year following the timetable change of Oyu Tolga underground mining production schedule. Because it is delayed for 1.5, almost 2 years, the other investors may watch it because this is a really largest project in the country, one. Secondly, it also depends on if the equity capital increase process of Mongolian banks will have some problem. Then it's really a matter of having less economic activity when you cannot borrow enough to this emerging economy. The third one, of course, following other international circumstances, the prices for the goods we sell could be changing.
So, how will the economic growth slow? China's economy is growing much more slower now. How will that affect Mongolia? Because most of our import is from China, and will this affect Mongolia in a negative way or a positive way?
Slow growth of China immediately will impact on Mongolian economy. You know, we sell coking coal and copper. These are the two ingredients important and can be seen them through how much auto car sales happening in China. Because car sales are mostly consisting of this metal that is made by the coking coal burning, because it is burning, the steel can be melted under lower temperature or under smaller cost than the higher with the coking coal. And the second one is, again, our copper mostly go to China, and China use for a lot electric car. So car production in car sales, particular car sales have decreased continuously for the last 14 months in China, which is a very clear example how the economy is growing less. So that will immediately impact on the way we trade with China and also on Chinese yuan rate. So we do expect immediate impact of slow growth of China, economic growth of China on the Mongolian economy.
So what does Mongol Bank do to keep the inflation rate in check, and what can they do to make it decrease it?
Inflation rate is coming mostly because the economy is not competitive. Economy is not enough exporting, so that we keep, because the inflation is a lot cost also the fluctuation of the exchange rate. So not to have more dollars to the country, we need to sell more goods, which less dependent on the commodity circles like the copper and coal, but we should be exporting more other goods. If the money is available for those companies who are producing other goods, that's one issue. If it is not available, another issue. At which cost? So that's why the key to increase inflation rate, you need to increase the credit rate, interest. For that, you need to decrease saving rate. It requires healthy competition of commercial banks, and yet our commercial banks, for example, some of them have increased the equity capital with the money where the source is not clear. It shows that the commercial banks are not that healthy. That's why, and that's what, by the way, we do expect. And now I understand Mongol Bank will first of all go into those commercial banks, so that your equity capital increase is not recognized, or it is, say, we will not regard this as increase. You do it again. If you cannot do after a certain time, the government can take their certain shares, which is already in a provision of financial stability law of the country, where Mongol Bank has the right to organize, and the state can go and take over shares in those not high quality equity capital commercial banks.
Okay, so let's get into our last topic for the day. So in February 2018, the government of Mongolia made a decision to ban usage of raw coal and promoted usage of refined fuel to reduce air pollution problem. And to enforce this, transporting raw coals into the city for fuel was prohibited on the 15th of May this year. In the frameworks of this, drafts to free refined fuel from value-added tax was presented. So about this one is, can the current government and the municipality of Ulaanbaatar introduce refined coal or brick coal into the regular usage of the people?
It depends on the price. There is a plant which produces the coal briquette from Tavan Tolgoi coal. They bring there and they produce here. But now the issue is the price and the value. If this value per money, are equivalent of what the coal costs, then people will more or less buy it. If it is a little bit higher, because it's an issue of how long the briquettes can be burned, right? Coal, it's, for example, you put at night, and in the morning it goes per basket of coal.
But the quality of the coal is in question. Most of the people are complaining that it is not, it's not producing much heat, but it's just
you mean that briquette doesn't produce the heat compared with the coal that used to have. So let me give you some statistics. Smoke problem is persistent in this country. Who are producing smokes? Almost 200,000 chimneys from the Ger areas, okay, 200,000. And this is the main source of the air pollution in Ulaanbaatar. These people, who are these people? These are the people which has very interesting statistics. The people in Ger districts spend 7 times more money for heating than the people living in apartments through this coal, individual heating, etc. Yet, 58% of Ulaanbaatar workforce live in this Ger district. So you can imagine that almost 60% of workforce are heating themselves with 7 times more cost than people living in housing. And poverty level in Ger districts at the level of 38%, where by the country it's 29%. So if these people can afford buying those called briquette, that's the issue. If they can do it and they find it's comparable with the coal price that used for whole winter, then it will work, provided that it gives the same heat level than the coal.
So raw coal is banned. And will the government, provoke the illegal sale of raw coal? Because
again, we will see that when the cold weather comes within maybe 2-3 weeks. Then, if the people are happy with those briquettes they buy and heating, and then they have the same heat per value per money, then probably people will be using it. If not, if they need to pay more money, now there is even a proposal of the government to release the VAT tax on those briquettes. So otherwise it is increasing them 10%. So if it's released, maybe it can help them to be more competitive with their ordinary coal. If it is not, the people will try to buy coal by all means, either from Nalech, which is 45 kilometers distance from Ulaanbaatar, where the reserve is finished, but people illegally producing coal there, or Baganur, 150 kilometers away, the only and the most largest coal in the country. But people will find the way how to bring in the speculate coal.
Right.
So we will see. We cannot say it now, but again, it will depend on the price level and availability of that briquette.
So, the United Nations presented a research report on Mongolia about the expenditure and lost opportunity caused by the air pollution. And so, what do you highlight from this research?
There was a UN report on air pollution fight of Mongolia, as you are referring to. And that report says that the PM particles went down from 2012 to 2015. Then it started to increase from the end of 2015, early, the spring of 2016, it had increased all the way now. That's interesting observation. In spite of all this spending we made from year to year on combating that air pollution. Plus, the report says that this air pollution became one of the 10 risk groups,
Main cause of deaths.
10 risk cause, 10
main causes
of death in Mongolia. The third very interesting statistics is made. It turned out that Mongolians spend about $645 million a year to combat air pollution, which is around 1.6 or 7 million dollars a day that this poor country spends against air pollutions. And this is, on the other hand, also lost opportunity. With this money, we can create so many other kindergarten schools, right? So that's very interesting statistics they made. And Mongolia is getting a lot international aid to combat air pollution. But finally, the most effective way of combating air pollution is making affordable housing for those poorer areas of the Ulaanbaatar city. And somehow all construction companies here building very expensive apartments, even for average American, it's very expensive apartments in Ulaanbaatar. So the point is how to get affordable housing made and sold or rented to those people who are living in Gir districts today. This is the agenda number one. Without affordable housing, we cannot complete combating air pollution.
Right. So, fortunately, that is all the time we had for today. We will see you next week with more topics about this. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.